He was clinically dead for over 7 minutes. His heart stopped, his body shut down, and when they brought him back, he said, "I've been to heaven, and I saw my son." But the world didn't know, because by then, Johnny Cash was already a legend, and legends aren't supposed to break. But he did. Again and again, this is the full, devastating story of the man in black. A man who sang about pain because he lived it. Johnny Cash didn't just sing songs, he carried them like a cross. Like a confession, like a prayer whispered in the dark. Born J.R. Cash on February 26, 1932, in Kingsland, Arkansas. He entered the world during the Great Depression, a time of dust, hunger, and silent suffering. His parents, Ray and Carrie Cash, were poor cotton farmers, living in a wooden cabin with no electricity, no running water. They worked from dawn to dark. They prayed, they sang, and young J.R., who later changed his name to Johnny, absorbed it all. But there was a shadow in that house. His older brother, Jack, was 2 years older, bright, strong, the pride of the family. At 17, Jack was crushed in a sawmill accident. He bled to death in front of his family. Johnny was just 14. He never got over it, he said later. "I always felt like I was living for two people after that, like I had to be Jack." That loss shaped him. It gave his voice a deep, mournful weight, a sound that would one day echo across the world. He carried guilt, grief, and a quiet belief that he didn't deserve the life he had. When Johnny was 14, his family moved to Arkansas, a government-run farming colony. There they were given land, a house, and a chance. Johnny worked the cotton fields. He picked, plowed, and endured the sun. But he also began to dream. He got a guitar, he wrote songs, he listened to the radio, Grand Ole Opry, blues, gospel, folk. He was drawn to music that told stories, music that felt real. In 1950, he joined the U.S. Air Force, stationed in Landstuhl, West Germany. There he formed a band with friends, the Landsmen, and played at bass shows. He also bought his first tape recorder and began writing songs. One of them, "Hey Porter," was about the train ride home. Longing for the South, he sent a demo to record labels. Most ignored it. But in 1955, Sam Phillips at Sun Records in Memphis listened. He didn't hear perfection, he heard power. A deep, rumbling voice, a steady, train-like rhythm, a man who sounded like the earth itself. Sam Phillips said, "He's got a sound I've never heard before, like a freight train in a prayer." And just like that, Johnny Cash was signed. In 1955, he recorded his first single, "Cry, Cry, Cry." It wasn't a hit, but it was a sign. Then came Folsom Prison Blues, a song about a man behind bars, hearing a train whistle and dreaming of freedom. "I hear the train a-comin', it's rolling round the bend." The lyrics were raw, the rhythm driven by Luther Perkins. Simple, twangy guitar was hypnotic. It was unlike anything in country music, and it was based on truth. Johnny had performed for prisoners before. He felt a connection to them. He once said, "I never felt like I was above a man in prison. I knew I could have been there." Then came "I Walked the Line," a song about loyalty, temptation, and moral struggle. It became his first #1 hit. It defined his image, a man trying to do right, but always on the edge. And the look, black clothes, stiff posture, a voice like gravel and grace. He didn't wear black yet, but the man in black was being born. In 1956, he married Vivian Liberto, a woman he met in California. They had 4 daughters, Roseanne, Kathy, Cindy, and Tara. But life on the road was hard. Johnny toured constantly. He was gone for weeks. He struggled with loneliness, pressure, and identity. And then came amphetamines. At first, they were given to him by promoters, uppers, to keep him awake during long drives. He called them pep pills. But soon, he was dependent. He also began drinking heavily, and in 1957, he met June Carter, a member of the Carter family, country music royalty. She was funny, she was bold, she was married, and Johnny was instantly drawn to her. They began performing together. The chemistry was electric, but Johnny was still married, and his addiction was growing. He would disappear for days. Go on binges. Lose himself. In 1965, he was arrested in El Paso, Texas, for drug possession found with pills in his pocket. In 1967, in Turkey, he was arrested again, this time for starting a forest fire. Yes, really, he was trying to burn weeds. It got out of control. Over 500 acres burned, he later said. "I was trying to kill a rat. I ended up burning down half of Turkey." He paid a fine. He laughed about it later. But the truth was darker. He was lost, and June Carter saw it. She didn't leave him. She tried to save him. She told him, "You need to get clean. You're better than this." But Johnny kept falling. In 1967, he overdosed and was clinically dead for over 7 minutes. Doctors revived him. He woke up in a hospital, weak, broken, and June was there. She didn't scold. She didn't leave. She said, "I love you, but you have to choose." That moment changed him. He went to Nickajack Cave in Tennessee, where he had once gone to die, and instead, he prayed. He said, "God, if you're real, help me." And he began to fight. He went cold turkey. He suffered withdrawal. He stayed with June's family, and slowly, he came back. In 1968, he married June Carter. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a rebirth. She became his anchor, his voice of reason, his partner on stage and in life. And that same year, he did something no one expected. He went to Folsom Prison. Not to visit, to perform. He walked into the yard, wearing black guitar in hand. The inmates were restless. Some doubted he'd show, but when he stepped on stage and said, "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash," the place erupted. He opened with Folsom Prison Blues, a song about being exactly where they were, and when he sang, "I shot a man in Reno, just to watch him die," they howled, because they knew he meant it. The performance was raw, electric, real, and when it was released as an album, at Folsom Prison, it became a cultural earthquake. It wasn't polished, it wasn't safe, it was truth, and it made Johnny Cash a national icon. A year later, he did it again, this time at San Quentin. Same black clothes, same deep voice, same fearless energy. He joked with inmates. He sang "A Boy Named Sue," a Shel Silverstein song he turned into a hit, and when he said, "I love you all," you could hear the silence, then the roar, because Johnny Cash didn't look down on prisoners, he looked into them, and he saw himself. By the 1970s, Johnny Cash was more than a musician, he was a force. He hosted his own TV show, The Johnny Cash Show, on which he featured artists of all kinds: Bob Dylan, Aretha Franklin, Louis Armstrong, Derek and the Dominoes, the Statler Brothers, June Carter Cash. He didn't care about genre, he cared about soul, and he gave a platform to voices that might have been ignored. He also became a spiritual seeker. He read the Bible constantly. He wrote songs about faith, doubt, and redemption. Man in Black, a song explaining why he wore black, became a mission statement. "I wear the black for the poor and the beaten down, for the prisoner who has long paid for his crime." He wasn't being dramatic, he was being honest, and people believed him. But the demons weren't gone. In the late 1970s and 1980s, Johnny struggled again. After years of amphetamines, his body was breaking. He had nervous system damage, high blood pressure, addiction relapses, and in 1983 was diagnosed with Scheidegger syndrome, a rare degenerative disease similar to Parkinson's. Doctors said he had 5 years to live. Johnny didn't quit. He kept touring, he kept recording, he kept preaching. He said, "I'll sing until I can't stand." In 1997, he had a double bypass surgery. In 1998, June Carter died after heart and neurological problems. Johnny was shattered, he said. "I lost my compass, my reason, my love." He lived only 4 months after her death, but even in grief, he created, because in the 1990s, something incredible happened. A young producer named Rick Rubin saw Johnny not as a legend but as a poet. He signed him to American Recordings, a label known for hip-hop, not country. And he did something radical. He stripped everything away. No orchestra, no backing band, just Johnny, his guitar, and a microphone. In 1994, they released American Recordings. The album was dark, haunting, full of murder ballads, spirituals, and covers of songs by Nick Cave, Leonard Cohen, and 9 Inch Nails. When he sang Hurt, a song by Trent Reznor, it wasn't a cover, it was a confession. "I hurt myself today, to see if I still feel." The video showed Johnny in his home, old, frail, surrounded by memories. Trent Reznor said, "That song isn't mine anymore. He gave it back to me as a gift." The album won a Grammy. It introduced Johnny to a new generation, and it proved greatness doesn't fade, it deepens. Johnny Cash died on September 12, 2003, at the age of 71, just 4 months after June. He was buried next to her in Hendersonville, Memory Gardens, Tennessee. At his funeral, the eulogy wasn't given by a preacher, it was given by Billy Graham, the famous evangelist. He said, "Johnny Cash wasn't perfect, but he was real, and in a world of pretense, that's a rare kind of holiness." So who is Johnny Cash? He wasn't just a singer. He wasn't just a rebel. He was a witness. To pain, to prison, to addiction, to love, to redemption. He sang for the forgotten. He stood for the broken. He lived on the edge, so he could speak for those who couldn't. He wore black not because he was dark, but because he saw the darkness in the world and refused to look away. He once said, "You build on failure. You use it as a stepping stone." And he did. Every fall, every arrest, every overdose, every loss. He didn't hide, he didn't lie. He sang. And in doing so, he gave people permission to be human, to fail, to grieve, to hope. There's a moment just before dawn at his home in Hendersonville, Tennessee, where the trees whisper in the wind and the silence feels sacred. Johnny sits alone on the porch, guitar across his lap, staring at June's garden. She's been gone for months. The house is too quiet, no laughter, no singing, no voice to steady his soul. He doesn't play a song, he just holds the guitar like it's the last piece of her, and in that stillness, the truth settles in. He's not just a legend, he's a man who loved too hard, lost too much, and now has nothing left to say except through music. So he picks up the guitar and sings. Not for fame, not for fans, but for survival. Let's talk about his relationship with God, not the image, but the reality. Johnny Cash wasn't just a gospel singer, he was a seeker. He read the Bible every day, cover to cover. Over 100 times he didn't preach to be seen. He preached because he needed to. Believed. He struggled with doubt, with guilt, with the idea that he wasn't worthy of grace. After his overdose in 1967, he said, I died, and I saw my son. People thought he meant a vision. He meant Jack, his brother. He said, I saw him in a field of light. He smiled. He said, you're not done yet. And then I came back. That moment changed him, not because he became perfect, because he realized he was seen, that someone God, Jack loved, hadn't given up on him, and so he wouldn't give up on himself. Now, let's go deeper into his addiction, not the arrests, but the shame. Johnny didn't just use pills to stay awake, he used them to run. From the guilt of being famous while his brother died, from the pain of failing his first family, from the fear that he didn't deserve June. He once said, I didn't start using because I wanted to party. I started because I couldn't face the morning. And the deeper he fell, the more he hated himself. He would wake up in motels, not knowing where he was. He'd find pills in his pockets he didn't remember taking. And when he looked in the mirror, he didn't see Johnny Cash. He saw a fraud, but June never let him disappear. She'd find him, bring him home, sit with him through the shakes. She didn't preach, she didn't leave. She said, I love you, even when you don't love yourself. And that love, relentless, unshakable, saved him. Let's talk about his daughters, not the public image, but the pain he had for with Vivian Liberto, Roseanne, Kathy, Cindy, and Tara. And though he loved them, he wasn't always there. He was on the road he was using. He was lost. Roseanne Cash, who became a Grammy-winning artist, once said, I loved my father deeply, but I was afraid of him. I didn't know if he'd come home, or if he'd even remember me. The family struggled with the tension between the man on stage and the man at home, and when he left Vivian for June, after years of emotional distance, it left scars. He admitted it. In his autobiography, he wrote, I failed my first family. I wasn't the husband or father I should have been. I can't change that, but I won't pretend it didn't happen. And that honesty, rare for a star, is part of his legacy, not perfection. Accountability. Now, let's go behind the scenes of Folsom Prison, not just the concert, but the meaning. When Johnny walked into Folsom on January 13, 1968, he wasn't there for publicity. He was there because he believed in redemption. He knew what it was like to be judged, to be broken, to want a second chance. And when he looked into the eyes of those men, he didn't see criminals. He saw himself. He opened with Folsom Prison Blues, a song about guilt, isolation, and the sound of a train that means freedom. And when he sang, I shot a man in Reno, just to watch him die, the inmates roared, not because they glorified violence, but because they felt seen. One prisoner later said, for the first time in 10 years, I didn't feel like a number. I felt like a person. That's the power of Johnny Cash. He didn't preach to prisoners, he sang with them, and in doing so, he gave them dignity. The album at Folsom Prison became a cultural landmark. It wasn't polished, it wasn't safe, it was real, and it made him a hero, not to the public, but to the forgotten. Then came San Quentin 1969. Same black clothes, same deep voice, same fearless energy, but this time, he joked. He called the guards ladies. He teased the warden. And when he sang A Boy Named Sue, a Shel Silverstein poem turned song, the place exploded. The inmates laughed, they cried, they felt alive. And when he said, I love you all, you could hear the silence. Then, the roar. Because Johnny Cash didn't just perform, he connected. He once said, I don't sing for the free, I sing for the bound. And that became his mission. Let's talk about his TV show, not just the guests, but the vision. From 1969 to 1971, the Johnny Cash Show aired on ABC. It wasn't a typical country program, it was a revolution. He featured Bob Dylan when Dylan was considered too radical, Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, singing gospel, Louis Armstrong, jazz legend, smiling and playing trumpet, Derek and the Dominoes. Before they were famous, the Statler Brothers, June Carter, Neil Young, Stevie Wonder. He didn't care about genre, he cared about truth, and he gave a platform to artists who were real, even if they weren't popular. He once said, music isn't about borders, it's about souls. And the show became a sanctuary for authenticity. But ABC canceled it. Why? Because it wasn't commercial enough. Johnny didn't care, he said. I'd rather be honest than rich. Now, let's talk about his later years, not the legend, but the loneliness. After June died in May 2003, Johnny was broken. She had been his balance, his joy, his reason. He said, I don't know how to live without her. He tried. He went to her grave every day. He played her songs, he talked to her, and he kept recording. Even as his body failed, he had Shy-Drager syndrome, a degenerative disease that stole his strength, his voice, his balance. But he still sang, because music was the only thing that made sense. Let's go deep into the American recordings era, not just the albums, but the resurrection. In the early 1990s, Johnny Cash was considered washed up. His records didn't sell. His voice was weak, health was failing, but then came Rick Rubin, a young producer known for hip-hop, Beastie Boys, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Slayer. He didn't see a has-been, he saw a poet. He signed Johnny to American Recordings, a label with no country roots, and he did something radical. He stripped everything away. No orchestra, no backing band, just Johnny, his guitar, and a microphone. In 1994, they released American Recordings. The album was dark, haunting, full of murder ballads, spirituals, and covers. When he sang Delia's Gone, a song about killing a lover, his voice was calm, chilling, not because he glorified violence, because he understood sin. And when he sang Bird on a Wire, a Leonard Cohen poem, it felt like a prayer. But the masterpiece came in 2002, Hurt, a song by Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, a song about self-destruction, regret, and pain. When Johnny sang it, it wasn't a cover, it was a confession. Hurt myself today, to see if I still feel. The video showed him in his home, old, frail, surrounded by memories. Photos of June. His guitar, the garden. Trent Reznor said, I liked the original version of Hurt, but I loved his. It made me feel like I wrote it for him. The song won a Grammy. It introduced Johnny to a new generation, and it proved, greatness doesn't fade, it deepens now. Let's talk about his final days. After June died, Johnny's health collapsed. He was in and out of the hospital. He could barely walk. His voice was a whisper, but he still tried to sing. He recorded a few final tracks like the 309, I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry, songs about death, trains, and longing. He knew he was dying. He said, I'm ready, I just want to be with June. On September 12, 2003, he died at 71. He was buried next to June. At his funeral, Billy Graham gave the eulogy. He said, Johnny Cash wasn't perfect, but he was real, and in a world of pretense, that's a rare kind of holiness. Let's talk about his legacy, not the fame, but the impact. Johnny Cash didn't just influence country music, he influenced Bob Dylan, who said he was the North Star, Bruce Springsteen, who called him the greatest of them all, Bono, who said he sang like a man who'd seen the end of the world, Eminem, who admired his honesty and rebellion, Casey Musgraves, Chris Stapleton, Sturgill Simpson, all carry his spirit. He proved that authenticity is the only lasting thing, and he wore black not for style, but as a promise, to stand with the poor, the prisoner, the broken. He once said, the key to life is to live it, and he did. With flaws, with fire, with faith, he fell, he rose, he lost, and through it all, he sang not for glory, but for truth. So the next time you hear I Walk the Line, or Ring of Fire, or Hurt, don't just hear a song. Hear a man who carried grief like a shadow, who fought demons like a soldier, who loved like a poet, a man who proved that you don't have to be clean to be holy, that you don't have to be perfect to be powerful, that you can wear black and still walk toward the light. Johnny Cash wasn't just a musician, he was a witness. To the pain, to the hope, to the human soul. And as long as there are people who feel broken, who've loved and lost, who still believe in second chances, his voice will keep rolling, like a train in the distance, like a prayer in the dark, like a man in black, walking home. There's a moment just after midnight in a small room in Hendersonville, Tennessee. The house is silent, the world is asleep. Johnny Cash sits in a worn armchair, Bible open on his lap, a single lamp casting long shadows. He doesn't read to perform, he reads to breathe. To find peace in the storm of memory. He's not the legend tonight, not the man in black, not the voice that shook prisons and palaces. He's just a man old, tired, grieving, and in this quiet, he speaks not to the world, but to God. I don't understand much, he whispers, but I trust you. And that, more than any song, more than any award, more than any concert, is the heart of Johnny Cash. Not perfection, not power, faith in the dark. Let's talk about his voice, not just the sound, but what it carried. It wasn't trained, it wasn't polished, it was earned at every crack, every growl, every whisper. It carried the weight of cotton fields at dawn, amphetamine binges in motel rooms, prayers in prison yards, love songs sung to June under the stars, grief so deep, it had no words. And when he sang, you didn't just hear a man, you heard a life of fire and faith, of sin and salvation, of a man who walked the line not because he was strong, but because he kept getting back up. His voice wasn't beautiful in the traditional sense, but it was true, and in a world that rewards perfection, truth is the rarest sound of all. Now, let's go deep into his relationship with June Carter Cash. Not just the love story, but the rescue. They didn't just fall in love. She saved him, again and again. When he was lost in pills, in binges, in shame, she didn't leave. She stood. She said, I love you, but you have to choose. And when he overdosed in 19, dead for over 7 minutes, she was there when he woke. She didn't scold, she didn't gloat. She held his hand and said, welcome back. And when he went to Nickajack Cave, where he once went to die, she let him go, because she knew he had to find God on his own. Their love wasn't fairy tale, it was real. They fought, they doubted, they struggled, but they never stopped choosing each other. And that choice, day after day, year after year, became the foundation of his second life. He once said, I didn't find June. She found me, and she didn't let go. And when she died in May 2003, after years of heart and neurological illness, he said, I lost my compass, my reason, my love. He lived only 4 months after her, not because he was sick though he was, but because he was done without her. The world had no center. Let's talk about his final performances, not the fame, but the courage. Even as his body failed, Scheidrigger syndrome stealing his strength, his balance, his voice, he kept singing. In 1999, he performed at the Glastonbury Festival in England. He was 67, he could barely stand. His voice was thin, but when he sang Ring of Fire, the crowd of 150,000 fell silent, then erupted. They didn't care that he was frail. They saw the spirit, and they honored it. He said later, "I don't care if I can't sing. As long as I can stand, I'll sing." And he did. Even in wheelchairs, even in hospitals, even in pain. Because music wasn't his job, it was his prayer. Now, let's talk about his influence on American culture. Beyond music, Johnny Cash wasn't just a singer. He was a symbol, of integrity in a world of pretense, redemption for the broken, dignity for the forgotten, faith for the doubter. He wore black, not for style. He wore it as a statement. In his song Man in Black, he explained, "I wear the black for the poor and the beaten down, for the prisoner who has long paid for his crime, but is there because he's a victim of the times." He didn't sing about prisoners because it was cool. He sang about them because he felt them. And when he walked into Folsom and San Quentin, he didn't just perform, he validated. He looked them in the eye and said, "Without words, you matter." And that changed lives. Former inmates have said, "I got out because of Johnny Cash. He made me believe I wasn't trash." That's not fame, that's ministry. Let's go behind the scenes of the American recordings, not just the music, but the miracle. In the early 1990s, Johnny Cash was considered over. His records didn't sell. His voice was weak. His health was failing. Columbia Records dropped him. The industry said, "He's done." But then came Rick Rubin, a young producer known for hip-hop and rock. Beastie Boys, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Slayer. He didn't see a has-been. He saw a prophet. He signed Johnny to American Recordings, a label with no country roots, and he did something radical. He stripped everything away. No orchestra, no backing band, no safety net, just Johnny, his guitar, and a microphone. In 1994, they released American Recordings. The album was dark, haunting, full of murder, ballads, spirituals, and covers. When he sang Delia's Gone, his voice was calm, chilling like a man confessing a crime. When he sang Drive On, a song about soldiers returning home broken, it felt like a eulogy. But the masterpiece came in 2002. Heard a song by Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, a song about self-destruction, regret, and pain. When Johnny sang it, it wasn't a cover, it was a confession. "I hurt myself today, to see if I still feel." The video showed him, in his home, old, frail, surrounded by memories. Photos of June. His guitar. The garden. Trent Reznor said, "I liked the original version of Hurt, but I loved his. It made me feel like I wrote it for him." The song won a Grammy. It introduced Johnny to a new generation, and it proved greatness doesn't fade. It deepens now. Let's talk about his final days, not the death, but the dignity. After June died, Johnny's health collapsed. He was in and out of the hospital. He could barely walk. His voice was a whisper, but he still tried to sing. He recorded a few final tracks, like the 309, I'm So Lonesome, I Could Cry, songs about death, trains, and longing. He knew he was dying. He said, "I'm ready. I just want to be with June." On September 12, 2003, he died at 71. He was buried next to her. At his funeral, Billy Graham gave the eulogy. He said, "Johnny Cash wasn't perfect, but he was real. And in a world of pretense, that's a rare kind of holiness." Let's talk about his family, not the fame, but the healing. He had 4 daughters with Vivian, Liberto, Roseanne, Kathy, Cindy, and Tara. And though he wasn't always there, lost in addiction, on the road and pain, he tried to make amends. Roseanne Cash, who became a Grammy-winning artist, once said, "I loved my father deeply, but I was afraid of him. And then, in his later years, I finally knew him, not as a legend, as a man." He didn't excuse his failures. He owned them. And that honester for earned him forgiveness. He said, "I failed my first family, but I learned from it, and I tried to do better." And he did. Now let's talk about his spiritual journey, not the sermons, but the search. Johnny wasn't a preacher. He was a seeker. He read the Bible constantly, over 100 times, cover to cover, but he didn't claim to have all the answers. He struggled with doubt, with guilt, with the idea that he wasn't worthy, but he kept coming back. He said, "I don't have to understand God, I just have to trust him." And that trust, born in cotton fields, tested in prisons, refined in grief, became his anchor. He didn't preach to convert, he preached to confess. And in doing so, he gave others permission to believe in when they felt broken. Let's talk about his legacy in music. He's influenced Bob Dylan, who said he was the North Star; Bruce Springsteen, who called him the greatest of them all; Bono, who said he sang like a man who'd seen the end of the world; Eminem, who admired his honesty and rebellion; Chris Stapleton, Casey Musgraves, Sturgill Simpson, carry his spirit. He proved that authenticity is the only lasting thing, and he wore black not for style, but as a promise, to stand with the poor, the prisoner, the broken. He once said, "The key to life is to live it." And he did. With flaws, with fire, with faith he fell. He rose, he loved, he lost, and through it all, he sang not for glory, but for truth. So the next time you hear "I Walk the Line," or "Ring of Fire," or "Hurt," don't just hear a song, hear a man who carried grief like a shadow, who fought demons like a soldier, who loved like a poet, a man who proved that you don't have to be clean to be holy, that you don't have to be perfect to be powerful, that you can wear black and still walk toward the light. Johnny Cash wasn't just a musician, he was a witness to the pain, to the hope, to the human soul. And as long as there are people who feel broken, who've loved and lost, who still believe in second chances, his voice will keep rolling, like a train in the distance, like a prayer in the dark, like a man in black, walking home. There's a moment just after sunrise in a small church near Hendersonville, Tennessee. An old man sits in the back pew, head bowed, hands folded. He doesn't come for show. He comes because he believes deep in his bones that grace is real, even for men like him, men who've failed, men who've fallen, men who've worn black, not as fashion, but as a confession. His name is Johnny Cash, and in this quiet, he doesn't ask for fame, he asks for mercy, and that prayer, simple, humble, unrecorded, might be the most powerful thing he ever did, because it wasn't performed, it was lived. Let's talk about his relationship with failure, not as a flaw, but as a foundation. Johnny Cash didn't just fail. He fell hard from the top, from grace, from love. And every time, he got back up, not because he was strong, because he had no choice. He once said, "You build on failure. You don't repeat it, you learn from it, and you keep walking." And he did. He failed as a husband in his first marriage. He failed as a father when he was gone too long. He failed his body with pills and drink, but he never failed himself, because he kept trying. And that's what made him a legend. Not the voice, not the songs, not the black clothes, but the refusal to stay down. Now, let's go deep into his creative process, not the myth, but the truth. Johnny didn't write songs in studios. He wrote them in motels, on tour buses, in hospitals, on napkins, no schedule, no pressure, just moments. A train whistle at 3 a.m., a letter from a prisoner, a photo of June on the dashboard, and a line would come. "I keep a close watch on this heart of mine. Love's like a bomb baby, coming down on me. I hurt myself today, to see if I still feel." He didn't force it. He let it rise like smoke from a fire, and when it came, he recorded it fast, before it faded. He once said, "If you think too much about a song, you kill it. You have to let it breathe, let it bleed." And that's why his songs feel like confessions, because they are. Let's talk about his influence on prisoners, not just the concerts, but the lifelines. After Folsom and San Quentin, thousands of inmates wrote to him, not for autographs, for hope. One man wrote, "I've been here 20 years. I thought I was forgotten. Then I saw your concert. You looked at us like we were human. Thank you." Another said, "I was going to kill myself. Then I heard hurt and I cried, and I decided to live." Johnny read every letter, and he responded not with platitudes, but with truth. He said, "I've been where you are, not in prison, but in my soul. And I got out, so can you." He didn't see himself as a savior. He saw himself as a fellow traveler, and that's why they believed him now. Let's talk about his final album, not just the music, but the farewell. In 2003, months before his death, he recorded American V100, Highways. He was weak. His voice was a whisper. He could barely stand. But he sang songs like "God's Gonna Cut You Down," a haunting folk tune about divine justice. "Danny Boy," a tribute to his brother, Jack, like the 309, a song about death and trains, written by his son John Carter Cash. When he sang "Tear-Stained Letter," his voice cracked, not from age, from grief, because June was gone, and he was singing into the silence. Rick Rubin, his producer, said, "He didn't make music to be heard, he made it to bear witness." And that's what these final recordings are. Not an album, a testament. Let's talk about his family, not the fame, but the healing. He had 4 daughters with Vivian, Liberto, Roseanne, Kathy, Cindy, and Tara, and though he wasn't always there, lost in addiction, on the road, Impanye tried to make amends. Roseanne Cash became a Grammy-winning artist. She once said, "I loved my father deeply, but I was afraid of him, and then in his later years, I finally knew him, not as a legend, as a man." He didn't excuse his failures. He owned them, and that honesty or for a star earned him forgiveness. He said, "I failed my first family, but I learned from it, and I tried to do better." And he did. With June, he found peace. With her children, Carlene, Rosie, and John Carter, he found family again. And with his grandchildren, he found joy. He spent his final years on the farm, walking the land, telling stories, playing guitar, not as a star. As a grandfather now. Let's talk about his spiritual beliefs, not the sermons, but the search. Johnny wasn't a preacher. He was a seeker. He read the Bible, constantly, over 100 times, cover to cover. But he didn't claim to have all the answers. He struggled with doubt, with guilt, with the idea that he wasn't worthy. But he kept coming back. He said, "I don't have to understand God, I just have to trust him." And that trust, born in cotton fields, tested in prisons, refined in grief, became his anchor. He didn't preach to convert, he preached to confess. And in doing so, he gave others permission to believe in when they felt broken. Let's go behind the scenes of the Hurt video, not just the emotion, but the truth. When Trent Reznor saw the video Johnny in his home, frail, surrounded by memories, he wept. He said, "That song wasn't mine anymore. He gave it back to me as a gift." The video showed photos of June, his guitar, his Bible, the garden they planted together, no actors, no sets, just life. And when Johnny sang, "What have I become, my sweetest friend?" he wasn't performing, he was remembering. Love, loss, regret, redemption, and the world. Saw it? The video won awards. It went viral decades before viral existed, but more than that, it became a cultural touchstone. A reminder that greatness isn't about staying strong, it's about being real when you're weak now. Let's talk about his legacy in film and culture. He's been portrayed in movies, documentaries, books, and songs. Joaquin Phoenix won an Oscar for playing him in Walk the Line, a film that captured his rise, his addiction, his love for June. But Johnny never wanted a biopic, he said. "Don't make me a saint. I'm not. Don't make me a devil. Not that either, Jess. Tell the truth." And the truth is this. He wasn't perfect, but he was real. And in a world that rewards image, that honesty became his greatest gift. Let's talk about his impact on modern artists. He didn't just influence country, he influenced Bob Dylan, who said he was the North Star. Bruce Springsteen, who called him the greatest of them all. Bono, who said he sang like a man who'd seen the end of the world. Eminem, who admired his honesty and rebellion. Casey Musgraves, Chris Stapleton, Sturgill Simpson, Tyler Childers, all carried his spirit. He proved that authenticity is the only lasting thing, and he wore black not for style but as a promise to stand with the poor, the prisoner, the broken. Now, let's talk about his final words. He didn't leave a grand speech, but he left letters to his children, to fans, to God. One note, found in his Bible, read, "June, I'm coming. Wait for me, I love you." And on September 12, 2003, he died. At 7-1. Buried next to her, and the world wept, not because a star fell but because a light went out. Let's talk about his home, not the mansion, but the meaning. He lived on a farm in Hendersonville, Tennessee, a palace, but a modest house surrounded by trees, a garden, and a pond. He didn't need luxury, he needed peace, and there, with June, he found it today. The home is preserved, though damaged by floods, but fans still come. They leave flowers, they play his songs, they sit in silence, not to see a museum, to feel his presence. Because Johnny Cash didn't just live there, he healed there. Now, let's talk about his voice after death. It didn't fade, it grew, because his music wasn't about trends, it was about truth. And truth doesn't age. When a soldier listens to "The Man Comes Around" before deployment, when a grieving person plays "Hurt" after a loss, when a prisoner hears Folsom Prison Blues and feels seen, Johnny is there, not in the grave, in the song. And that's immortality, not in statues, in sound. He once said, "The key to life is to live it," and he did. With flaws, with fire, with faith, he fell, he rose, he lost, and through it all, he sang, not for glory, but for truth. So the next time you hear "I Walk the Line," or "Ring of Fire," or "Hurt," don't just hear a song, hear a man who carried grief like a shadow, who fought demons like a soldier, who loved like a poet, a man who proved that you don't have to be clean to be holy, that you don't have to be perfect to be powerful, that you can wear black and still walk toward the light. Johnny Cash wasn't just a musician, he was a witness to the pain, to the hope, to the human soul. And as long as there are people who feel broken, who've loved and lost, who still believe in second chances, his voice will keep rolling, like a train in the distance, like a prayer in the dark, like a man in black, walking home.